you who were expecting Ryan Frederick, who has been the host of Startup Grind for many years. Ryan, do not fear. He hasn't been eaten by a bear, hit by lightning, or anything like that. He's just spending more time to travel and write his book and do other fun stuff. And I'm sort of the new host of Startup Grind. So you probably don't know me. My name is Lucas Latour. I've been in startups in Columbus since about 2013, created my own business, sold it, and most recently was the COO of a company that was on Shark Tank. And now I work in business development at AWH, and I'm now the new host. So tonight, our guest is the man here you see in the picture, Robbie Friedman. And Robbie and I connected a few weeks ago. Very interesting background. Robbie is the founder and CEO of ootBox. And Robbie, I'm pronouncing that right?
You are.
Okay, fantastic. And ootBox, and forgive me if this is not right, but it sounds like you make these, I want to call them remote shipping container, modular offices. They're very beautifully designed, made out of a shipping container. You build and lease them out to people. And Robbie's super interesting as well because you started out as a New York City attorney. You've also founded and exited from another company related to legal billing industry. And very recently raised $900K to help grow ootBox. So welcome, Robbie.
Thank you for having me.
All right. Is that a pretty good intro?
It is. I'm gonna expand on your description of ootBox a little.
For sure. Please tell us more.
So you know those moving pods that you see everywhere.
Mm-hmm.
So imagine that, but instead of a storage pod, it's like a really beautiful, inspiring room that we can just deliver anywhere. And that's what ootBox is.
And ootBox is geared toward people who have sort of what problem? Like, what's the essential need for an ootBox?
So it could be anybody who needs additional temporary space. So you could think of like a construction trailer where a company might rent one because they need additional space at a school or whatever. We're like that, but we can go, on construction sites, but we can also go in people's backyards. We could go, we have one at BrewDog right now, but we also have one at hospitals as testing stations. So, it's a much more flexible product wherever temporary space is needed.
Gotcha. And this was started pre-COVID, right? Like, how long has it been around?
So we started prototyping about a year ago, and yeah, people thought we were insane. And I think you may have somebody said to me recently, people making masks were also insane a year ago. And I love that. I love that analogy. But yeah, started about a year ago. People thought we were crazy. Nobody understood why they would be deploying temporary offices because they have homes. But as somebody with kids, it was obvious to me why you would be deploying temporary offices out of the house. And I guess COVID sort of helps in a way.
Yeah. The way that we are, seeing our workforce distributed, we've all now, I think at this point, had the experience of working remote at least part of the time. It's now obvious some of the problems that are coming up related to productivity and just your attention span and things when you're working out of your home, whether you have kids or not. And I think something like this could be a really good solution to that. But unfortunately, COVID is forcing us all to think about, or maybe it's not unfortunate, it's fortunate. We're all starting to think about optimizing our workforce. I wonder, how do you see sort of the landscape of work changing in the future? Do you see more of these going into people's homes? Are these going into sort of like the B2B settings, like you mentioned in in the brew dogs or in people's offices to create like more personalized, like I guess private type environments? Where do you see this going?
So I think people are not going to end up going back to the office in the way that they were.
Mm.
We've sort of broken the mold. I don't think people are going to go back and, sort of give FaceTime like we used to have to do in the old days. And so I think what we're seeing a lot of is that people want to control their environment where they work. And, I think people are starting to either retrofit their homes or, build onto their garages or any sort of number of, additional space solutions at their homes without being inside their homes. In terms of ootBox, we don't really know. We've sort of gotten this far by not deciding whether we're going to target all residential or all commercial. It's the same product. It's the same leasing mechanism. And so we're still just letting the market tell us, if the future of ootBox is more residential or B2B.
Gotcha. I'm curious a little bit about sort of how you got like initial traction and got into this position where you're able to do things like raise like 900K and stuff. How did you really start this project out? Like, what were some of like the early adopters, and like how did you find them?
So when we started about a year ago, we built some prototypes and we put them in public places and asked people to use them as very temporary workspaces, for a couple hours a day, etc. And what we quickly found, not super quickly, but within a couple months, we found that developers were approaching us to put them in development sites. And once we realized that there was a B2B avenue for our boxes, we realized that we can optimize, the interior and the exterior for those sort of branding and experiential opportunities. And then COVID hit, and we really had no traction yet at that point. We had 8 boxes that were pre-leased to corporate campuses around the US, but once COVID hit, all of that stopped. And we started to get calls from like hair salons and jewelry stores, people who wanted to deploy them outside of their houses. And we sort of just go along with whatever cool opportunity comes our way. We had planned on raising money in the spring. We didn't. We sort of stalled on that. And then in June, we called some of the investors from my prior startup. And within 2 weeks, that seed round was closed. Wow.
That's amazing. So, you've had this previous startup and now you're doing another one. What makes you want to continue doing startups after having a successful exit? I mean, I think a lot of people might think, hey, I've hit my exit, I'm just going to go sip Mai Tais on the beach. What makes you want to continue to do startups?
I did that. I checked out for like, I don't know, 2-ish years. And it was awesome. It was everything that everybody says.
Sweet. I didn't know that. That's cool.
But eventually you have to get back to work. And you can't go back to a regular job after you've run a startup. You're sort of damaged goods because you can't really work for somebody. You can't really fit into a regular work mold. And so really what happened with ootBox was while we were selling the last startup, my wife had a baby. My wife and I had a baby, but she did all the work. And I couldn't work from home and I couldn't go into the office because, a lot of the conversations we were having were not office appropriate. So I built a little shed in my backyard, and that concept stayed with me while I was checking out for 2 years. And I sort of couldn't stop thinking about it. And it was just on my mind 24/7. And that's when I knew that would be my next thing.
Gotcha. So it's interesting. So it's sort of like avoiding boredom in a sense.
I don't know if it's avoid. It's nothing so intentional. It just sort of happens. But yeah, eventually you have to go to work.
Yeah, it's interesting. Yeah, no, and I'm just trying to like figure out kind of what drives you a bit. And it's interesting because I know a lot of lawyers, and well, I don't know a lot. I know a few lawyers, but the lawyers that I do know tend to be a little bit like risk averse, and I know lawyers can start cool companies, and there are probably many who have. But like, what got you in that entrepreneurial mindset coming from something like that? I mean, I think I asked you before, but like you didn't really have like entrepreneurial influences that like pushed you in that direction, right? Like what do you think kind of got you into that mindset as an entrepreneur?
I think that I just did not like lawyers and did not like being a lawyer. I mean, I knew that I wasn't going to like being a lawyer, but I did it anyways. And so in 2000, so I graduated law school in 2008. 2012 started Viewable, which was related to the legal industry, and it was sort of my way out of the practice of law. So it wasn't like an entrepreneurial calling or an entrepreneurial spirit. It was really just something better than practicing law.
Yeah. But I mean, like, there's a million things you could have done, right? Like outside of law. But you sort of found like, it's interesting because like when I started getting into entrepreneurship, I don't know if I would have had the right mindset or like understanding of it without really being enmeshed in sort of the entrepreneurial community and like seeing other people doing it and that sort of stuff. Did you ever have kind of like an aha moment, like, oh, this is kind of something that I could do theoretically, like if I see other people doing this?
I mean, I guess I'm kind of the opposite. I would prefer not to know what I'm getting into, because I know that once you know, everything becomes really scary. So no, there was not really an aha moment where it was like, oh, this is what entrepreneurship could be. There's no like influences or anything like that. It was more just taking a risk to do something that was more enjoyable than practicing law, and intentionally not asking too many questions about how difficult the process would be.
Gotcha. And once you started getting into the process, was there a period where you felt like, this is a lot harder than I thought it was, this is way riskier than I thought, maybe this is not right? Or were you always kind of just like in the mindset of like, we're going to make this work?
Always in the mindset of we're going to make this work.
Dude, see, that's so wild to me, because I feel like a lot of entrepreneurs sort of like have these like what I've heard them called black days or black moments where you're like, you're just not sure it's going to work. But it sounds like even with the first one, you were kind of hitting traction pretty early on and maybe never hit that sort of.
You're always not sure it's going to work. Just to clarify, you never know it's going to work, but you still know you're doing the right thing because it's fun, because it's better than the alternative.
Yeah. And that's, I think before we were talking about like why you do it and stuff, you're mentioning something like you just like creating things, like you like having the the autonomy like I was saying, I think before, that it kind of reminds me of Elon Musk saying like, well, I just want to look at the future and not be sad. So it's kind of like you're actually just having fun doing this.
Yeah, I mean, I came from a law firm where like, and I swear to God, this is a true story. I got yelled at because I stapled papers at the wrong angle. And like some asshole yelled at me for stapling at the wrong angle. And so to sort of come from that world where you have no power or control over your own destiny, to a world where you are in total control of what happens to a certain extent. You're in total control of how you go through your day to day, and where you want to spend your energy, and where you want to get your creative outlet. That's fun. Like if you can make a living doing that, then then that's a good job.
Yeah. Do you feel like what is your average day like now? Like how much of it is taken up by like because you're the CEO, right? Like, so how do you sort of balance your time and kind of divide up your responsibilities? I'm just curious about sort of like the operational side of things now.
So my co-founder Allison, right now we're going through like a building period with our boxes. So I've been spending a lot of time, at the workshop, helping, giving opinions, overseeing that, because I love it. I love like the building process. And so for right now, Allison has absorbed a lot of the operational aspects while I'm able to sort of tinker totally creatively. And I think that what is really, really important is to have a good partner. The thought of doing this alone is scary, but doing it with a partner who you trust and is totally capable, allows you to take risks in the day to day.
Yeah. Do you think that there are any other things while we're on that sort of are, I guess, good guidelines to keep in mind for people that are starting a business or starting a startup? Like you mentioned, finding the right partner. Anything off the top of your head that are like pitfalls to avoid? Because
I really think that finding the right partner is the biggest thing. Finding the right partner and making sure that you enjoy doing what you're doing, even like the shittiest parts of it. If you can enjoy the worst parts of what you're doing, that's important, because there's a lot of like worst parts that you have to be doing.
Yeah. What, if you don't mind me asking, what is the worst part? You do mind? What is the worst part of it for you? You can pass too if it's like.
No, I'm gonna pass. I just have to think. But I think a lot of the worst part has to deal with, breaking through the mold that was not created for you. We have to inform consumers and the marketplace what our product is and how it works. And for myself, that's, I'm not like a natural salesperson. Allison is not either. Sorry, Allison.
It's okay. We already learned Allison's a great partner. So that's
right.
That's right. Making the whole thing work, running the operations.
So the sales aspect for me is probably the worst part, and all the stuff that goes along with it. I like dealing with the customers because they allow us to be creative. But like just the sales stuff.
Is that, now when you talk about like sales, are you saying like outbound, like Because like when I think of sales, there's so many different ways you could do it nowadays. Like some people have like inbound strategies where you're using content to bring people to you, or there's like the old school, I'm cold calling, cold emailing, or there's a number of ways you could
So,
do it.
so
But
I'm talking even later in the process, when it's time to sort of close a sale
mm,
and then you got to chase.
mm.
That's the worst. I would like to skip that part of every sale and go straight from the beginning to the end.
So like the checks just start rolling. You ever do you have like a thing on your website where people can just buy these, or not buy them? Because I know you don't, let's make it clear for the audience. You don't actually sell the boxes, you lease them, right?
Correct.
Have you ever thought about putting like a lease form on your site?
So we have a quote request and then we reach out. Right now, because our inventory is low, we're worried about what that will mean. If we just let people start leasing and we have no control over where they are and how we're going to deliver to them, we just don't know what that means.
Gotcha. So you're low on inventory. Like, what does the next few months look like? Are you just building tons of these boxes and storing them somewhere?
We're rolling 25 more boxes out over the next about 6 weeks. A lot of those boxes are spoken for. Right now we're getting a lot of hospitals reaching out.
Wow, that's awesome and also sad in a way.
Well, it's awesome. I'll say it's all awesome because the reason a lot of these hospitals are reaching out is because they're trying to deliver services in a different and unique way. And rather than bringing people into the buildings, they're using our ootBoxes to sort of have a private experience outside of the larger building. And, one of the things that's so cool about what is happening in the world right now is everybody is throwing the status quo out. And everybody's willing to try new things. And so like, I don't know if like the Mayan calendar was wrong or whatever, but like now, it does feel like all of society has sort of switched into a new mindset where, the old doesn't matter nearly as much as it used to. And
so what were you gonna say?
I don't know. Go ahead.
I was gonna. So it's like we're switching to sort of like a culture of more innovative thinking. We're throwing out some of the practices that weren't necessarily optimized, and it's kind of like forcing us to live in a new sort of mindset where things are changing pretty rapidly. Is that kind of what you're saying?
And it's fascinating to see. I mean, obviously there's a lot of scary stuff happening at the same time. But that's sort of natural when such a massive change is taking place, on a global scale.
Yeah. Yeah. So it's interesting. And I think you kind of mentioned earlier, like you're not exactly sure where things are going in the next few years, but you've kind of got these 25. Do you have any sort of vision about like how many of these remote offices, I keep calling them remote offices, but I want to say ootBoxes that are out in the world? Do you have like a metric or something? You're like, I want to see a million of these out there.
5,000 is our goal.
5,000. Gotcha. That's a lot.
It's not really a lot. I mean, look, there's 1 million construction trailers in the US today. 1 million. And we could be everywhere that they are, plus in people's backyards, plus at restaurants, plus in all these cool places where construction trailers can't go. So 5,000 isn't, 5,000 is a lot, but it's not, I think the market can handle it.
What do you think would have to happen for you to be able to get to like 5,000 manufacturing wise? Are you going to have to raise a lot more money to get to that number? What does that look like?
Yeah, that will look like, a Series A in about a year, and some much more streamlined manufacturing processes.
Gotcha. Maybe let's talk a little bit about kind of like the process too of like, how did you come to using a shipping container? Because this is kind of interesting. Was it originally a shipping container?
The one I built in my backyard was not a shipping container. The one I built in my backyard was just like me adding sticks to more sticks, like a very like you know, I had no experience doing what I was doing when I built one in my backyard. But you know, there are about 35 million shipping containers in the world. Something like 20 million of those, 25 million of them come to the US every year. And right now, you know, because we're at a massive trade deficit and because we have nowhere to send our recycling, most of those containers stay here in the US with nothing to do. You know, I think it's something like 12 million containers are sitting in the US with nothing to do because they're not being used to go outbound. For us, you know, once we decided that we wanted this sort of workspace model that we wanted to be able to move and bring to people and to companies and to sites, a shipping container was sort of an obvious envelope for us because it's weatherproof, they're everywhere, it's sustainable, and you know it minimizes the amount that we have to actually build. So for us, it was really just a matter of the most pragmatic structure.
Gotcha. And like when you have the thought, oh, maybe I could use a shipping container, how did you go about like, all right, I'm going to find this? Like, are these just like sold by companies that you,
so for the
like
first
Alibaba?
So no, I spent a lot of time on Alibaba. It's not so easy to order
Totally.
on Alibaba. But so for the first one, I bought a 40-foot container on Craigslist, brought it to a company that agreed to work with us and had them cut it, and then just started playing around to see like what we can do with the structure. A lot of what we do is play and experiment and sort of test the limits of containers and what we're building. But we just wanted to see if we could use, you know, how small could we cut a piece such that it was comfortable, usable, and accomplish everything that we wanted to do. And so the first one that we cut was actually 8 feet long. And then we sort of revised our manufacturing process, and now we buy 10-foot containers. So, you know, the size grew a little bit, but that's only because we were able to get bigger units with less metalwork as we build them.
So when somebody's coming to lease one of these from you, like what can they expect from sort of like the design and like the options and that sort of stuff? What is sort of like the core package of an ootBox? So I know we got the shipping container, but just to kind of give people a little bit more of a picture of what it is.
So it's a 10-foot container. It comes totally turnkey. All you as a user need to do is plug it into a regular outdoor outlet. One side of it is all glass. The back side of it is glass door. It comes, you know, carpet, felt walls, lights, work table, chairs, heat, AC, and you can customize any of the finishes. So you can customize the floor choices, you can customize the wall choices, you can even customize the exterior color. And if you are a company, you're probably going to brand the outside as well. So that's something that we work with our customers to do so that when they get the box, all they have to do is open the doors and it's ready to go.
That's awesome. how many people typically can one of these like 10-foot things fit? I think I read it's like designed for like 4 people, up to 4. Is that right still?
So in the pre-COVID days, we would say 6, but we had seen 10 people use it before. Now we don't talk that way. Now most companies want to fit 2 to 3 people in it, and so that works better for us. But yeah, we've seen as many as 10 people use it for a meeting before. But right now we're designing them for 2 to 3 people, which is really just a matter of furniture choices. We don't need to put seating in there for 4 to 6. We could put a much different configuration for 2 to 3.
Do people have like weird requests for what to do with their ootBox? Like, hey, can you make mine like float in the air tied to hot air balloons, or like what kind of?
I wish. I would love it. No, the requests are pretty normal at this point, but I would love if a customer wanted to tie it to a hot air balloon and float across the country.
I just watched, there was like, I think David Blaine did some kind of experiment where he tied himself to hot air balloons and floated in the sky. So what is the weirdest place that you put one of these though? Like, so there's not that many out there. So
right now there's, I think, 7 out there.
Gotcha. So
the weirdest place we had one was on Miami Beach.
That was kind of weird.
Yeah, it was like on the beach. It was rented by a wine company. Yeah.
Do you know what they were using it for? Was it like a little bar where they just like serve wine, or?
I think so. They were a little like secretive about it. They didn't really include us in their plans, but we did get a peek on Instagram. We saw they had repainted it. It was all hot pink. And then when they gave it back to us, they repainted it back. But
yeah, and that's actually interesting too, with like the customization and then the leasing model. I guess it probably would it be your preference to not customize, given that like these might come back at some point, or how often do these really come back? Are people still just mainly just using them in perpetuity, or do you kind of set a lifetime value of it expected?
The typical lease is 4 to 6 months, and we try to do all the customizations. We like when there's a lot of customizations, because it shows the box in different ways. And right now we're, like I mentioned, we're at that stage where we're trying to be playful with our product, trying to sort of push all the different directions it can go. And so, we love when a customer has like heavy customization requirements.
That's awesome. And I don't know if it's fixed or if it changes, but what roughly is one of these things? Like, how much would it cost? Does it vary?
Yeah, I mean, it depends on your term, but between $750 and $1,000 a month.
Gotcha. And the reason I'm going through all these questions, just to give people some idea, in case they are thinking of getting one, maybe you have some interesting ideas. I'm sure Robbie would love to hear from you. Whether somebody's listening in or you're here now. So I guess, like, how do you see this playing out over the next few months? Are you going to grow your team? Are you pretty heads down? And I think it's pretty interesting too. Like, you're only 2 people right now, right?
Correct.
What do you see happening over the next? Are you going to hire a bunch of people? Or are you going to try to stay pretty lean?
We're going to try to stay pretty lean. A lot of the industry that we're in, a lot of the stuff can be done with outsourcing. Eventually we'll have to start hiring, and that will be a great thing. But right now we're focused on moving boxes, and that doesn't take a huge team in-house.
And I think that's good for people to remember too, if you're listening in, because I think a lot of times you think, well, I have to have, tons of people on my team so that I can, efficiently operate. But essentially you've launched, and now, I mean, I don't know if you would call it a successful startup, but it sounds like it's growing and it's going in the right direction, with just a couple people. So you really don't need.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if it's the most efficient way, but it's it means that like we do a lot of stuff, and
Yeah.
that's fine.
Yeah.
But it's definitely not
Yeah.
the most efficient way.
What is your day-to-day like? Are you waking up at 5 a.m. and going to midnight? Like, how do you balance it? Because you said before, like, you have a family, and I think a lot of people wonder about this idea in startups. There's on the one hand, people say, okay, if you ever want to do anything in startups, you've got to sacrifice your entire life. You got to sell your house. You got to, work until 1 a.m. and wake up at 5. And, there's sort of the grind, ethos. And then there's, I guess, also the other side of it where, you can be efficient and you can work a normal day. And if you solve a problem that really fills a need, you may not necessarily need to get to that extreme. Where do you kind of see like how you operate? Is it somewhere in the middle?
Yeah, so I've been there where it was waking up at. I've never been a 5 a.m. wake up person, but going to sleep at 5 a.m. 8 and doing it all over. And that was my last venture. I think I'm a little bit older now. I have family now. I'm not looking to do that every day. But, when I feel inspired, there are plenty of times when, I'm up very late and up very early because, I feel inspired to do so. And I think that that's sort of a fun part of the stage that we're in, where you could sort of explore the creative limits of what you're doing. And, I'm not like a musician. I have no other creative outlet. And so this is that for me. And so sometimes it's bad hours, but only because I want it to be.
Gotcha. Did you ever, even with like your previous company, did you ever sort of hit like a burnout phase, where you're just like, I'm doing this all the time. I need to like get away. Like, how do you deal with that? Do you experience that? I feel like you're kind of like a machine and you probably don't get burnout that often, but
yeah, so I definitely felt burnout, towards the end of my last one. But my last one, I was dealing with lawyers. It just wasn't as fun. This is a different thing because we're building a physical product. And, I grew up in a real estate family. My wife's an architect. I always have opinions that nobody cares to hear. But like, this is my little thing where it's purely my opinions and it's great.
That's hilarious. What does the family think of ootBox, if you don't mind me asking? Do they see the future in the same way? Do they see how big it could be?
I think so, yeah.
Oh, that's good. That's good.
Yeah, I mean, like my wife and I geek out on it all the time. It's nice to have an architect in-house, both like figuratively and literally, because it's really like all we talk about is like these little design details. And again, I'm like a lawyer by training. I have no business being in this little pod world. And so, it's fun for me to like pretend I'm a designer some of the time.
Yeah. It's funny. I don't know if you've ever had an experience like this, but when I was starting my first company, my business partner's grandma came to us and offered us both $5,000 to quit. She's like, it's not going to be anything. Did you ever have any kind of like moment like that where people were, whether this company or your first company, where people didn't see the vision, or were they pretty on board? Like, with what you're doing?
I would say most people don't see the vision, but my family, my wife does. You know, the other thing you asked a few minutes ago, like important startup things, and a
Yeah.
good partner, you know, an idea that you love. But if you have a spouse or a partner, and I mean, you know, a live-in partner,
Yeah.
it's really important that that person is, you know, as much on board as you are, because, you know, there are those really late nights, there are a lot of stressful days, and that person sort of has to understand without getting too involved.
Yeah.
And I'm really fortunate that my wife has been through it before. And, you know, she's like a really good cheerleader.
That's awesome. Yeah, I think that's super important. I also tend to think about like who you spend time with, who your friends are, and I know there's sort of the cliche at this point that, you know, you're the average of the 5 people you spend the most time with, and I think there's like a point there, like who you spend time with is important. I don't think there's a literal average, but yeah, I think it's super important to keep in mind. Do you find community though with other entrepreneurs to be important for you as an entrepreneur, or are you pretty good with just like relying on, hey, I've got my core family, I've got my team? What are your thoughts on that? Because some people go through like a lonely,
Yeah, no,
journey.
I mean, there, in everything I've always done, you know, there has been like an anxiety of influence. You don't want, you know, you don't, I like my own thoughts, and I don't want them to be impacted by those who I'm around. So I've never really engaged in like the startup communities.
Mm,
Never really engaged in a lot of the stuff that surrounds the startup life. I guess I'm an introvert,
mm.
which makes sense. You know, I'm building boxes so that you don't have to go into a building. It makes sense that I'm an introvert. You know, a lot of what we're doing is to prevent people from having to go into like co-working places and interact with that startup lifestyle. So, and now with COVID, you know, I see Allison and my wife, and that's it. So I guess, yeah, I guess I don't really engage with the whole startup world.
That's interesting. That is interesting. I guess that just speaks to personal needs, you know, like some people really need that and need to be around people. And then there's sort of like introverted people. I would count myself also as an introvert. Like, I don't know if I technically need, although we're very grateful for all of the attendees here tonight. But I would actually, you know, are there any folks here who want to add a question? You know, we're kind of getting towards the end here. I feel like we should engage the audience a little bit. I see a few faces popping in. I see Warner and Ryan, who is always a great supporter of this event. Any questions from the audience?
Hey, Lucas, can I ask one?
Yeah, go for it.
Robbie, thanks for doing this. Is your window behind you new? Because it looks like there's a price tag still on the handle.
This is my allergy necklace with all my allergies on it.
Oh, well, why aren't you wearing it then?
Because I'm allergic to the metal.
Great question, Ryan. You sure you don't want to take over and host again?
No, that was my only question. I thought it was a price tag, so I figured his windows had just gotten replaced.
No, these windows are 100 years old.
Well, they still look fabulous.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ryan. Anybody else? We have Neil. Do you want to say something?
I missed the beginning, so forgive me if he covered this already. Hi, Robbie.
Hey,
Thanks
Neil.
for doing this. Lucas, thanks for hosting.
Yeah.
Ryan, we missed you, but Lucas is doing great. But Robbie, what's your? I think you said you're getting 25 new loot boxes, and most of them are spoken for. And I also heard you say something about medical applications. So is that like the ideal use case right now? And could that be scaled to 100 more if you have the inventory and the resources?
Yeah, I mean, it's a really good use case right now. I wouldn't say ideal. I mean, a lease is ideal from our perspective.
Okay.
But right now, yeah. So there's been a lot of interest from medical centers, you know, as sort of drive-through lab stations, drive-through testing. And right now, the ootBox makes a ton of sense for those applications. You know, you can use a tent for whatever you're doing from a drive-through lab perspective, or you could rent an ootBox for pretty much the same price. But the ootBox is safe, secure, beautiful, and branded.
Warmer.
Yeah. So that's where we're seeing a lot of interest right now. We're also, you know, a lot of our interest also comes from development sites for real estate. So yeah, I mean, from all over, but the medical side is definitely the one that is the most timely right now.
Okay, so my follow-up is, so what's your ask for this group here? You've got a bunch of people that are interested. Well, hopefully people are willing to help. People know people. What do you need right now? How can we help you?
Let's find hospitals to deploy ootBoxes.
Find hospitals?
Find hospitals, you know, here's one. I'll ask this. Abbott Labs is deploying a new test 15 minutes. They should be doing it in ootBoxes. So if there's somebody associated with Abbott or who can help put us in touch, rather than me dropping a box at the front door, which is the next step.
I have a good friend that works at Abbott, but I don't know if her role is a fit for that, but I will inquire.
Thank you.
Unfortunately, I'm guessing those people are in Chicago rather than the nutritional products people here in Columbus. Am I right about that?
I don't know, but you know, I think in general, hospitals is where we should be focusing right now. So if people have connections in health industry, I would love to talk.
All right, everybody, think about that. Here's the ask.
All right. If there are any other questions, this is your chance. This is the last call for questions, and then we will wrap up.
Hey, Robbie, I have a question.
Hey.
I'm actually a third-year law student at the Ohio State University Morris College of Law. I know you didn't enjoy your experience being a lawyer, but here I am. So I'm actually in an entrepreneurial business law clinic this semester. We represent startups providing pro bono services to those startups. So I'm actually very interested in the investment part you talk about. My clients are actually going to talk with the investor next week. So I was wondering, you said you get your investment successfully. So I was wondering, how did you convince your investor to get the investment? I thought that would be helpful for my clients. Thank you.
So I actually had a pre-existing relationship with the investors. They had invested in my last startup, and really, you know, I called them. Actually, they called me needing help with something totally unrelated, and then I just let them know about ootBox, and they said, "Hey, we could fund that." It was really not a super representative example of most fundraising, I don't think. It was our first fundraising discussion that we had in earnest, but I would say that, you know, in terms of your clients meeting with potential investors, I think that the most important thing for those investors to see is that your clients are passionate about it. Is that helpful?
Oh, thank you.
I would second that. Traction, knowing your numbers, and seeing that there's a captive audience for your product. Because what do they want at the end of the day? They want to see a return on their investment. So definitely second that. Any others? Any last ones? SJ, are you jumping in?
Yes, I will. Of those here, I think Neil knows me the best. Ryan's probably a close second. And they've probably heard me talk about the fact that I'm a big advocate for the independent workforce. I'm a future of work guy, gig sharing economy. So I just wanted to ask, based upon the trajectory of where you're going with the business, I'm getting the sense that you might be in that camp too. Would you say you are, based on how you're trending? Is that a fair enough statement to make, or you're not sure yet? You're sort of neutral?
No, I mean, I think we're in the future of work camp as well.
Yeah.
Excellent.
Yeah. Okay. Well, if there are no other questions, I would just want to wrap up by saying thank you so much, Robbie, for sharing some of your story with us and coming to Startup Grind. Everyone in attendance, we hope to see you again at the next one. And I'm blanking on our next one. Katie, do we know the next one? It's
Olivia from Tandem.
Olivia Weinstock from Tandem, who is a Drive Capital backed company, has a really interesting business model, and she's actually 21 years old and doing some really cool things. So please come out to the next one. And thank you so much for attending. We will see you all next time.
Thank you very much.
All right. Thanks, Robbie. See you.